of this report. Oh, sorry, can people hear me? Okay, thanks for that. I think it underplays what the value of this report is, because the problem actually in shifting from where we are to where we need to go fundamentally relates to the process of imagination, the process of understanding about a future that's not only idealistic, and certainly we're being shown something that is, but also something that's possible, that's real. Now, one of the best things I reckon about this report is the material up front, where Fergus very clearly, and the other author, very clearly demonstrate the sphere of influence. And it's a really interesting idea, and it's very well conveyed, and I encourage you actually to reflect on it, because it's different than how we tend to think about climate change and how we tend to think about our role in the world. And it's really very powerful as a result of that, so I encourage you to reflect on that as well. But we need to understand that that in itself won't be enough. That arguments against ending fossil fuel exports from Australia are deeply entrenched in the Australian political cycle. I mean, certainly Fergus knows that, and there's been quite some allusions to that, but don't underplay them. These aren't because politicians are trying to do poor things or deliver bad outcomes. It's about truly coming up with different ways of imagining what our national interest is. So at that point, I'd encourage you to think again about the material that Fergus talked about at the end, about the national interest. Because how we can, in a real sense, change the discussion around national interest to not only sound like it's idealistic and it's something that sounds nice but will never be achieved, to something that has a real economic value that we can demonstrate, that we can show to cold-hearted economists, because we need to show it to cold-hearted economists. Most economists, as Ken Henry are genuinely cold-hearted, but we need to be able to make the case in a compelling way in a policy context, and we need to make the case in an economic context. This report starts doing that, and I'm going to stop now and let you come up with questions and answers. But the one last thing I just want to say as a sort of wrap-up, what we really need to do now is focus even more, and Fergus alluded to this directly, focus even more on making the case about how we can actually deliver this. Because to be honest, the international stuff that Fergus is talking about is still very much exposed to people who I used to work with, I used to negotiate with, saying, you know, that sounds great, but it'll never work. And really what we need here is the imagination and the vision to show that it can. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian and Greg. So we have 15 short minutes for questions, and we don't actually have a wireless microphone. So what I might ask is for anyone wanting to make a question to stand over here, and we'll have a line of people. So whoever's got a question, race to the front. And I'd also like to ask that you say your name. Your question can be directed to any one of the gentlemen on the panel, but please make it short. Sort of, don't make a statement, make a question. Thank you.
My name is John Davidson. The question really is about who we try and put pressure on. What I'm noticing these days is that more and more businesses are actually making money out of green business and see their future growth in terms of green business. I think we need to focus on those people as people who are going to support and add momentum to green progress, and also focus on the people who work in those companies and whose livelihood depends on green. Paul Rowe at the moment really is saying, well, stuff for people who work in the green industries, but we want them to be AWU members. We need a Green Workers Union to fight the issue for green workers and to grow their jobs.
Do people hear me? Yeah. Great. Thanks for the question. I think that's right. I think we need to work with whoever we can, put pressure on whoever we can, using whatever arguments we can. What we try to do in this report is to, a number of things, but one of the ways we've been thinking about is trying to give people ammunition, to arm people with some new ideas and arguments and cases that they can make, be it in their everyday conversations with their next door neighbour, or when talking to politicians, when talking to business leaders, and working within communities, whatever it might be. New way of looking at the problem, new solutions, new analysis. I mean, to take your point about unions, and similarly with businesses, I think you're right, we're seeing, as green industries emerge, you start to see people with vested interests in growing renewable energy and other green industries. We have to encourage them and provide them with the analysis and arguments and political space to speak out publicly. Similarly, I think, encourage people to look, even within more established businesses, not to treat the business community as one big lump. Start with, for example, the investment community, which has generally, certainly internationally, been quite more progressive. The big investors, the pension funds, the businesses that necessarily operate with 30, 40, 50-year timeframes, and so therefore look beyond the next quarter's profit cycle. Let's start to arm them with some of this material so that they can also make the case. So I think there's lots of different levels at which we can act, and I think we need to start being very strategic about that. And as I said, my hope is that this will provide some small contribution to helping to arm people to make those arguments.
Thank you. My name is Max Beattie. I have an interest in this because I've got 4 grandchildren who are going to be growing up in this century, and I fear for their safety. The big question, I believe everybody in this room probably is very much in favour of what we've heard tonight, and we'd like to know how this could be implemented. I guess the major problem that I see, and I'd like a bit further comment on this, is the question of where are we going to find the national leaders? Are there anybody that we can pinpoint right now that we need national leadership? And the other one is because of the political process is so important in trying to get this thing going, and all the rich political people involved in our country at the moment are one way or another involved in the coal and export industry. Secondly, a specific question, what chance do you give to the introduction of a moratorium on fossil fuel projects in Australia? I'd like to ask the panel that particular question.
Okay, thanks very much. So on national leadership, yeah, obviously that's at the moment somewhat wanting. But I think there's, similarly with the point I made a minute ago about the business community, there are wedges that can be exploited there, and there are issues that can be talked about. I think one of perhaps maybe the challenges for the movement generally is, and Greg alluded this at the end, is focusing on the national interest arguments and the co-benefits arguments without ever losing sight of the climate imperative. I think that's always got to be front and centre. But as I said, what we tried to do here is also make not only the ethical imperative and the international responsibility arguments, but the national interest grounds. One of the things that I think is going to be interesting that we'll see, so I mentioned we're already seeing the two-speed economy and the impacts of that, particularly on manufacturing and services in the big cities. Now, Deloitte Access Economics, one of the country's leading mainstream economic consultancies, recently made the statement that the two-speed economy is about to go into overdrive with all these huge new projects that Bradley mentioned. So we're going to really start seeing the impact of the mining boom, and particularly the fossil fuel boom, which of course is only a small part of broader mining, and that we're focused on. You're really going to start to see the impact of that in the big cities. And so, again, if you can arm political leaders with arguments, economic arguments about the local impacts on jobs, whilst also at the same time running fantastic campaigns like Repower Port Augusta that show the alternatives, then you start to give people who might be sympathetic some of these arguments that they know are more likely to be able to play well politically in their electorates. In terms of the chance for a fossil fuel moratorium, I can't quantify that. What we wanted to achieve by this is the problem is that not many people are talking about it. I mean, FOE and a few others are the exceptions there, I think. But we need to actually start by making the possibility of it, by making it thinkable, making it possible, and again, producing more of these arguments and analysis. And then I think we gradually improve the chances of it. It's probably the best I can do.
point about leaders. I absolutely agree that there's a real dearth of leaders. But I think the way to combat that is to try to help each of us unlock, I guess, the concern that we have and find ways to harness our own initiative and creativity. So I'd like to ask everyone here, like, what's one thing that you can do this month, to try to support this transition? And what's one thing you can do to support somebody else to do the same? I think by that we can generate leaders from within, our own ranks. And in terms of what are our chances, I think they're very slim. I think we'd be kidding ourselves to say it's going to be easy, but I think it's absolutely worthwhile fighting for.
Is this working? Yeah, cool. Great, everyone applauded that, and I was going to say something completely in opposition to it. Let me start by a couple of things. If you look at the Australian Parliament, part of what happens is you don't get massive change in any one time. You get gradual change, and that happens. But I also think, as much as I look at current politics in despair, on all sides of politics, to be honest, there's not a single party that I don't despair about for one reason or another. That doesn't mean that there aren't individuals involved. And this comes from my experience in government on both sides, all sides of government, that actually have both the intellect, the vision, the imagination to try to come up with different approaches. That's not to say that I disagree that we shouldn't try to get more people and different people into Parliament at all. But I'm saying if we just assume that the only route to our salvation on this issue is by replacing the old with the new, I think then the odds really will be very slim. So I think what we need to do is to work with current politicians. I think we need to learn how we can make a case to them. This case cannot just be a moral and environmental case. I'm a consultant. I go in and I talk to a company, and I go in and talk to the environment manager. I usually don't get any work, and the work I get is usually pretty piddly. If I can go talk to the CFO about risk, if I can go talk to the chief executive officer, get to talk to them about what the opportunities are from responding to carbon, you get a different response. Same thing is true here with politicians. So I'm not saying I don't despair, but I'm saying there are things we can do to make life better. We just have to work on that. And in terms of odds, I agree that they're slim, but they may just be a little bit better than we think.
Hi everyone, my name is Beck. I'd like the panel to make a case to me. Let's pretend hypothetically. Oh, this isn't hypothetical. I'm a keen environmentalist, but hypothetically, I'm the Treasurer of Queensland, and I go, oh, I really believe in achieving what your plan wants to achieve, but what am I going to do about my royalties? Do you have an alternative taxation system that you propose to support on your plan? Or, yeah, just tell me how I'll get the money and I'll give you that tick. So can you please make the case for that?
Well, no, that's a great question. That's an extremely important one. And it's one we deliberately didn't address in this report. And we actually, Beyond Zero Emissions wants to make that case. We recognise that the economics of a phase down are an extremely important part of the equation, and it's something that we're actually, we want to start on doing that research on. Both how it would work, what the economics would be, and importantly, how we replace fossil fuel export income with sustainable sources of revenue and export income. I can't make that case to you right now, but I think there is a case out there. It just needs the time, the resources, and the skills. We need economists working on this. We need taxation people working on this. It's a whole other report. It's just not this report. So I agree that it's essential. And what we hope to do with this report is to kickstart this discussion, make it more mainstream, and start to actually get some of that in-kind support and financial support that we need to make the economic case. We're confident that there is a strong one. And so I look forward to looking at Matthew, him and the team will be able to answer that question very soon. And if you know anyone who would like to support Beyond Zero Emissions making that case, then